Hi everyone. Today our topic of discussion is how AI is changing the career landscape. I have with me Dr. Shashank Sharma, who's the CEO of Expedify. He is a PhD in marketing data science and is a graduate of IIFT Delhi. Dr. Shashank has worked at renowned brands like Nestle and Dabur. He's also a faculty at Masters Union, teaching ML and AI to our students. Hi, Shashank. Welcome to the Masters Union podcast. Today, we are going to discuss about how AI is changing the career landscape, right? Not just in India, but throughout the world. Now, you are an expert on data science, AI. Before I even go into how jobs are changing, I want to ask you how the world is changing. How do you think we'll be living our lives in a decade from now?
I think that's a very loaded question because
Hmm.
everybody's trying to imagine different scenarios and how the world will pan out in 10 years. But there are some things which are quite certain is that a lot of things that we do today, like there are two, three aspects to it. One is how personally we live our lives, and one is how professionally things that we do. Right. So on the professional front, it's very clear that a lot of the things that we do today, which are repeatable, which are something which do not require a lot of decision making, that will definitely be taken over by AI, right? So a lot of repetitive, boring tasks and mundane
Examples.
tasks. So an example would be in, let's say, in most business process outsourcing jobs, there used to be a lot of data entry jobs, right?
Yes.
Which were very mundane, very repetitive.
Correct.
I think very clearly those things will be completely eliminated, right? Then because the power of LLM, and that's one of the places where LLMs really shine or generative AI really shines, is summarizing documents. So a lot of what we did earlier again in business processing outsourcing world was, and even analyst jobs, was to summarize documents, balance sheets, which required a lot of time, lot of effort, and very clearly with the power of open AI and such LLMs, these things will become extremely easy to do, right? So summarizing document, trying to find insights, those probably are things where we'll not need a lot of human intervention going forward. Right?
I remember, so right after IIT Delhi, my first job was at Bain and Company, right? So how in consulting, your very first stint is as an associate where you're researching
Yes.
a lot of data points which are going to go into the client deck. And I remember recently I was making a deck and I was like, hey, how do I Google these data points? It'll take me three,
Yeah.
4 days. And Chat GPT could do that job of 3, 4 days in probably half an hour, right? And give me all the relevant data points for
Exactly.
me to build the story. So probably you're saying those kind of roles will completely be eliminated.
Absolutely. Those kind of roles will get eliminated. And then tying it back to your personal lives, searching for information. Now, of course, even today, there is a huge reliance on Google. And the way Google is now presenting the information is also very different, where you get a
Okay.
summary before you even start your search processes, right? So I think that will change phenomenally. Like in the last 2 years, a lot of my questions around, advanced topics within, let's say, even AI, have gotten answers from Chat GPT and not necessarily by going through, 100 different articles and trying to find sense myself. I get a very
So
crystallized
you have a
knowledge.
computer which can read through 1,000 articles and give you the answer that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Right. So then you were talking about the professional side of things. How will that change?
So on the professional front, see, every different roles will get impacted in different ways, right? So the way, I think that's one of the things that are discussed quite often, and there is nobody who knows the precise answer to how things are going to change. But if we look at it a little bit structurally, then I feel the impact will be of three kinds. One kind, which I already mentioned, summarizations, making summaries of documents, data entry jobs, repetitive and automated jobs. I think machines were already taking over. With the advent of SaaS, that was the key idea, that you are taking over repetitive tasks and you're allowing machines to do that. But it's the summarization aspect which is now taking it to another level altogether. That's one. Then there are many roles that will be modified by AI. So, for example, a very, very good use case, and I think one of the most widely used use cases would be in content creation, right? So that there we cannot eliminate a human intervention, but the roles will transform. Because if you look at it, and I think this is the data which remains true for any year that we look at, the amount of data or content that gets generated on internet right now in the past 2 years is more than what has been generated till date, right? And that will remain true for next year and next year and next year. So there is no doubt that the amount of content that gets generated will be huge. But now, instead of one person working on one copy, one script, one video at a time, these AI systems will enable that person to kind of be the moderator, while the machines and the AI engines are developing the content, creating the structure of the copy, things like content calendar, copywriting, video editing. This person will now play a role of a moderator. So that creative aspect will be required, but the modification is that instead of him trying to, erase the background, he can just do that with a prompt and quickly see the impact and then make decisions on how he wants to take his creative work forward.
Yeah, for example, give me this the static ad in these 4 different colors, and in a second you have 4 different colors, rather than you going and calling your graphic designer saying, hey, give me blue, yellow, red, and then you taking
then
a
waiting
call.
for 2 days for that to happen.
Correct,
now that can
correct.
happen instantly. So I think the final decision making, the whole idea that a person who has a creative knack can probably make better decisions and comparisons between
than wasting your
copies
time and doing like just doing basic stuff.
So moderation is what you will do, and the quality and quantity of content that you can produce as a content creator will be much more than what you were doing earlier.
Fair. So then, Shashank, if you're telling me that today AI can do the job of a graphic designer, AI can do the job of a coder that we know, right? AI can do the job of a Bain associate consultant. Then we are not far from AI becoming the CEO. And I've heard that joke already saying, can AI be the CEO? Then what kind of jobs are going to be there in the AI world?
Yeah, so that's again like the same point, like the same question which I answered. And my answer earlier was that it's not very easy to decide exactly what roles will exist and if you compare it how they are currently. It's very clear that the certain set of jobs will get modified, right? And I think a larger set of the the labor pool or the like all of us will probably try to achieve the same objectives that we are trying to achieve now, but the amount of support that we get will be manifold. It will be multi times more than what we get. But our job to be the decision maker, to be able to take the right direction as a CEO, let's say, of a company, that will still be ours, right?
So I think, Shashank, what I am asking is that if we look at the tech rules, right? So for example, I remember when I was graduating, computer science was the big deal, right? Everybody wanted to be a coder, software developer. Now you're telling me that there is a machine who can code for you. So then I'm assuming software developers are not needed, but there are people who need AI, who are needed to build AI, right? So what are those roles called, and what are those responsibilities, and what should we study? That's my question.
Right. So that's the third set which I was talking about. So there are larger pool for which the roles will get modified, enhanced, productivity will increase. But the third set are the people who are actually involved in building this AI systems, which are enabling the first and the second category, right? And those people have, I think, is where the roles will really expand. Because now I will compare it with a software engineer's role or the erstwhile coding role. But let's first understand what are these kind of roles which are right now increasingly required across companies. So while you have a chat GPT, which can understand human language and it can give you answers with prompts, there's still a massive task of orchestrating it in a way so that you get the desired outcome, right? If you have ever interacted, and I'm sure you have, like everyone else, you would have found that it takes a series of prompts to get to the output that you really want, right?
Yes.
If you are simply trying to get some information and some knowledge nugget, it can be easier. But let's say if you're trying to get something a little bit more complex, let's say if you are analyzing data, for example, you'll find that it takes a certain set of prompts, one after the other, to arrive at the precise answer that you require from it, right?
Yes.
So that's one part, which is called, was called ML Ops earlier. Now it is, you can call it AI Operations Manager. You can call it a data engineer who is currently working at solving AI problems and is currently involving these LLMs into the workflow, right?
Hmm.
So that's clearly a data engineer role or a data ops role, which will get modified into an AI operations role, where your key change would be to include these LLM systems to do what you require of them, because we all know that LLMs can hallucinate,
Yeah.
right? We all know that LLMs are not always known for giving you the precise answer and output you're looking at.
There have been some news, right, where I think it was probably Gemini who told a person to go and commit a suicide, and that was very
It
serious
was very
as to
serious, and you would have
why.
seen the ups and downs in Google shares given how Gemini has performed in certain
Correct.
cases, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge task behind the system to make sure that these LLMs do what you require of them to do, right?
Yeah.
So, for
So that's
example,
data engineering.
so that's data engineering at one level. The other part of it would be what was again a data scientist role, which is still a data scientist role.
Mhm.
But the way that will evolve is that given the advent of LLMs, a lot of focus and research will go on making sense of these LLM systems and foundationally working at the research level to make these LLM systems significantly better than what they are. So
Hmm.
there, if you look at it, you have your open AIs and the large language, the frontier models as we call them.
Yes.
But many businesses are working with their open source LLMs, or what we call small language models, which have the ability to understand human language, but then they are adopting them to their own businesses and their own business context. Because at the end of the day, these LLM models are very generic in nature.
Correct.
If you own a certain company, then for that particular company, given the knowledge base that you have as a company, the data set that you have, given the objectives you have, the value you want to provide the customer, you have a very specific need.
And a very small data set also, right?
And you have a very small data set. So what you're really asking is that while you have an LLM which has the ability to understand language,
Yeah.
and has a lot of information about the world, now it's like training a person in your organization, right?
Fair.
A person might come with 10 years of experience, but still he wants to understand the specifics of your organization
Fair.
before he can start really giving you the outcomes that you require of him.
Correct.
So it's very akin to that. And that's where I think there's a lot of explosion of roles where all the companies are looking to get people who can train these LLM systems
On those
on those
specific needs.
specific needs.
So
their own
if
knowledge
I were to
base.
add example here for our audiences, I think, for example, let's say a lot of students and parents come to us as Masters Union asking about, hey, what are the programs you have? What are the different courses that you teach? How are you different? What are the unique points? What are the placement records? And I believe that if there was like a AI chatbot,
Yeah.
You could just
Absolutely.
put in the question, and because that information is limited, right? If I feed in my brochure and if I
Absolutely.
feed in the whole website and some of the videos that we've done on these topics, the answers are there. It's just that for somebody who's new, they will ask these questions, and if there was a AI chatbot who was trained on all of this,
Yeah.
the answer would pop up in a second.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the best examples, because most of the companies want some kind of a customer service system. And the customer service professional was trained on all the knowledge bases.
So what is this role called? People who train these models and these things?
So these people are again AI engineers who train them. But I would also say that there are some roles within that may not require a very hardcore technology background, because ultimately, just like again from a human training perspective, you need people who need to also guide and tell the system whether it's making a mistake or not, right?
Yeah.
So let's say what we call human labelers, just to tell the AI where it is going wrong. If the answers, for example, in your case, the chatbot can come up with all kinds of answers, but there has to be a human moderation to say whether it's
initially
going,
at least
initially,
right?
And over the time, you see that's where the idea is, that's where most people feel the AI will go. That as businesses adopt AI, it will be for the specific need case. And that need case will be defined by some human sitting within the system who will
Yeah.
be working
Yeah.
with these AIs
Yeah.
and defining that.
And then tell me more about data scientists. I mean, that's a role that has existed for years now,
Right.
and I don't see that changing. So, for our audience, please tell us what data scientists do, and then tell us more about how that is going to evolve.
Sure. So I think the best way to look at a data science role is to see it as a Venn diagram where data science is at the center of people who have some mathematical foundational understanding of how things work behind the hood or under the hood, people who have some experience with information systems, IT and computer and some coding so that they can actually work with these models, and people who have a lot of domain expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So if you marry the three, that's where a data scientist roles emerge, because you're looking at someone given a business problem. Let's say, for example, if you're looking at Masters Union, then at any given point of time, you would want to know which kind of segments you want to target for your courses, right? Or you would want to do a lot of analysis on which courses are working, what kind of teaching methodology is working for the students. And all these questions are where you want to build some models to give you some very precise answers and predictions for the future, right? So what LLMs do is that they will, of course, give you a generic summarization, just like given the human language. But at the end of the day, the prediction has to be done by some machine learning models which are built on the data that you have and only you have, right? So a generic system will not work. A generic system will help you code faster.
So I think, for example, for a CPG company, which
Yes.
has like thousands of SKUs, if we have to predict the sales of those SKUs going
Absolutely.
forward, you look at the historical data, you look at how is the winter this season, how is the summer this season, will
Yeah.
I be able to sell
Yeah.
more ice creams or not, and use those variables to create a model that will then predict that, hey, in the North India, you're going to
Yes.
probably sell this many of this SKU.
Absolutely. And a model made by somebody in HUL for a Dove soap will not hold true for somebody sitting in PNG and trying to predict sales of their soaps and shampoos, right? So they will need to make their unique models which are true to their data set and their own domain understanding and their own, other various.
And that's what a
variables
data
in there.
scientist
That's
does.
what a data scientist does.
So you've explained us data scientists. You've explained us data engineers. Anything we are missing here? Like ML, for example, right? We haven't covered that.
So I think, see, data engineering as a role is coming up in a big way because, see, all this magic of AI happens only when your data flows seamlessly from a very unstructured raw format to a format where you can really put it into an LLM system and get your gold nuggets out of it, right?
Yeah.
And this is really the toughest part, right? I think.
And this is how you arrange your data.
Yeah, this is like extracting the data from wherever systems it sits in. Like any company has all its data spread all over the place, right? Coming from internet, media channels, marketing channels, sales teams, distribution. We need somebody to orchestrate and bring it together, transform it in a way which is structured, meaningful. And then when you throw it into any AI model or even LLM, that's when LLM can make sense of it.
Correct.
It can give you better outputs. So within this data engineering role, there are people who would be orchestrating this. And now one role which is emerging very, very fast is how to integrate LLM at each and every part of this pipeline. Because LLMs, like you rightly said, can help you code.
So LLM, for our audiences, in simple words, is something like ChatGPT.
It is a ChatGPT is a LLM. Gemini is an LLM.
Correct. So these softwares that we have been using, which can interact with humans in a normal human language, right?
They can interact with humans also. They can also interact with tools.
Correct.
Because ultimately they understand natural language. And given that and their information of the world, they can throw back answers to you, right? So an example would be like, let's say, for example, if tomorrow what we get is getting built is a very good example. If you want to plan a trip to, let's say, wherever you want to go next.
Let's say Kashmir.
Let's say you're going to Kashmir, right? So today, 2 years ago, it would have started with a Google search or maybe TripAdvisor, Make My Trip and other things, right?
Correct.
Today, I've seen many people and I have done that myself.
I have done that too.
You just ask ChatGPT to make an itinerary
for 5 days, make an itinerary for Kashmir.
Exactly, right? So it's all sorted.
Correct.
But there's still a huge task which remains for you, which is to go, find, compare prices, book the
Book the
tickets,
flights.
and book the flights. Now, what is getting built today is this ability, which is where, which is right now in the last 6 months, I don't think any term within this AI has been more used than agentic AI, where these LLM models interact with tools like Google search, like Make My Trip, like Clear Trip.
So are you
And
saying my chat GPT can go and book flights or make my trip?
Chat GPT will be the power behind it, but then Make My Trip possibly can build an agentic AI through which, once you ask Make My Trip to go and find, let's say, accommodation of a certain price point, book flights between a certain hours with certain price range, it can go and talk to all these systems basis what you require, and it can give you the best. It can even
And probably
book for
book
you
it.
and probably
And I'm
book it if you want.
thinking that suppose you do it 2-3 times, right? Then the agent also knows my preferences.
Absolutely.
That Swati likes to go to these kind of resorts.
Absolutely.
Right? She's a vegetarian, so she likes to eat this kind of food. And it can generate things without even me having to specify anything.
That's almost definitely where it is heading.
Isn't that scary, Shashank?
Yeah, it is scary. It is scary. It's also very interesting because you can understand that somebody who's very enthusiastic about it. It's also about, just seeing how things will change, and how I still feel somewhere the decision making will still remain with us. So today, YouTube, Instagrams, Netflix have all been bombarding us with stuff that they think you will like, right?
Yeah.
But you still have the power to start watching a new
Yeah.
content, and to, of course, the upside and the downside of this.
So what is
entire
this role called? People who create these AI agents.
So
Like,
see,
who will make my trip hire to create this AI agent?
so these would be people, like, at the end of the day, the core requirement would be to understand workflows in any system, right? So largely what we feel is that people with some, software background are currently making the core systems. So AI engineers are making these core systems which are enabling LLMs to interact with tools. Because what happens there is that you need to understand two things: one, how to interact with tools through APIs and some kind of a connection with their data, and then include LLM at each part of the journey to create a workflow which does this entire thing for you, right? So that's one core thing. But interestingly, in the last 1 year, what is also emerging are no code platforms for doing this.
Yeah.
So same agentic AI frameworks are now being replicated on no code platforms, where very wonderful applications are coming up, where you as a user can play with the interface, and you can probably build a chain of such tools where you make your own application
without even knowing a single line of code.
Yeah, so if, let's say, you want to create a recipe channel, so you can create a workflow where you can have an input recipe name. You can create Google search as a tool in between, which will go and find all the 5 websites where that recipe has been displayed. You will integrate an LLM to summarize all these different recipes and give the best solution. And then in the format that you want it to be presented, with images, again from Google Images or iStock, which are relevant for that.
Correct.
So you have
and I was just watching a movie, and that told me how scary it could get, when you use AI. AI could also create a video of mine with my voice, my face, talking about that recipe.
Absolutely. So
you won't be able to differentiate.
I think this is something in the last 5-6 months, the amount of shift on the change and the the jump in quality of these videos has been humongous.
Yeah.
So there are platforms like Hygiene and Runway.
So then in the long term, how do we differentiate fake and real?
It is going to become extremely hard for people like us to differentiate. In fact, it is going to become impossible. And so I think, there would always hopefully be checks and balances. Like Google, the way it has evolved into the best search engine is by doing this quality check, right? Through various methods.
Because we get the answer that we want.
Yeah, so it looks as something like an authority score to give you the best websites and the most credible websites.
Yeah.
Meta and all are also right now working towards identifying these fake videos and stamping it with that. So we definitely need the top tech companies to lead the charge on helping us navigate.
And I don't think only the corporates can do it. I think governments need
Yes.
to also come into play because, as is the story with OpenAI,
Yes.
right? It started with a non-profit trying to just advance the AI technology.
Yes.
But then, when I think in the corporate world, when you start seeing power and the benefits of
Yeah.
kind of, taking it not in the most socialist sense,
Yes.
then the corporate agents will do what's best for them, right?
Absolutely.
So it's probably the governments, the countries, probably the global organizations.
Absolutely. So it has to be that way. And but again, will it turn out that way? There are big questions, because if you look at, like, from what I have understood this space and how different governments are regulating this, of course, we know that in some way Europe is leading the charge on this, on
Mhm.
having some stricter frameworks around this.
Yes.
Not so much other countries, especially not other countries like China and others. Now, like you mentioned about corporate, if AI is the road to power, and
Mhm.
if one country does it, then how can other country
Protect
protect
themselves.
themselves? They have to be as aggressive if they want to get there,
No,
right?
you're right, and probably that's the reason why China banned, Google and
Because they wanted to
Facebook,
build their
and
own infrastructure, and now India
and
is at
also
a,
the privacy concerns, right? I mean, one is own infrastructure and own companies, but second is also like, where is this whole data
definitely,
going?
yeah. One was, I think, privacy concern, but I personally feel it was more so that they can build the AI infrastructure
Hmm.
which can be, at par with anyone in the world, or even supersede, which is definitely what they are trying to do. But
Yeah.
of course, we are no geopolitical expert.
Correct,
But
correct, correct. No, but fantastic conversation on the kind of careers that the students need today,
yeah.
in terms of getting a place in the AI world. So that brings me to a question which is further upstream the
Yeah.
value chain of jobs to skills to higher ed. Then, as higher ed institutes, right?
Yeah.
What are the skills that we need to be imparting to our students?
Yeah.
And then, as students, what are the skills that our students need to be going after in today's age?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And the way again, you have to again look at the past and see how things have emerged, and then probably make a guess on how things should be in future. So given that, see, if you look at software in engineering college in, let's say, 2000s and all, when we passed out, we were imparted some very foundational understanding of how computers work, right? Ever since, the languages, the frameworks, the libraries have expanded to an extent that nothing is recognizable. Whatever was being used then is not being used now, right?
Mhm.
But it's the same people who passed out then who are leading the charge on even these new developments,
Yeah.
correct? Because they have the foundational understanding of things. I think AI is going to be at least, 10 times faster in terms of how things are changing.
Hmm.
Because in the last 6 months itself, it's like, if I am asked what framework, what library, what platform I should use today, it's very hard to guess. Every month there is something explosive coming up, which, promises to change the world,
Hmm.
right? But I think at the heart of it, the essence of what LLMs do, what they are capable of, what are they good at, what are they bad at, and how to then orchestrate your systems around that. I think understanding this is very important. And languages, frameworks might change, but how LLMs work, if you are talking about generative AI in
Yeah.
essence, right? Not, because there's another aspect of it which has to do with classical machine learning and deep learning. You need to understand these foundational things, because tools and platforms will 100% go a phenomenal change, but they are all built on this: the foundational AI understanding, foundational deep learning understanding, how LLMs have been built, what are transformers. So if you have an understanding of that, I feel one should be comfortable with adopting anything that comes up. So as far as the LLMs are concerned,
Mhm.
or like the larger AI and the deep learning segment is concerned, again, you will have to answer this question in the same way: that what are the foundational aspects which one needs to know, so that no matter what changes, which platforms come up, you are, at least you have an understanding of how to evolve with the system, right? So I think that's where the focus should be in terms of higher education. And that would start with, again, fundamental understanding of data, statistics, machine learning being the, the core from where AI even starts. Understanding then deep learning, which is nothing but, a core aspect of machine learning, and taking it multi steps forward. And then the generative AI systems or LLMs, which are built on top of deep learning, and how LLMs are different. What are the nuances of LLMs? What is good with the LLM systems? What are the problems with LLM system? How to work around that? If you have this kind of an understanding, then no matter what systems come up and what changes happen, you will be able to find your way through it. You'll be able to stay with the changes, and you'll be able to grow with this, and this entire industry, which is probably will grow faster than the internet, as all the people say.
Correct. I mean, you kind of remind me of how the electronics engineering that I studied was, right?
Yeah.
So my question always was like, hey, there are so many machines. Am I supposed to know how a phone works, how a television works, how an
Yeah.
air conditioner works, how a refrigerator works? But the idea was that, hey, as you understand the logic gates
Exactly.
and you understand the circuits, you can create whatever
can
machine is needed to be
Absolutely. I
created,
think that's
right?
a great parallel.
Um,
And that's exactly how it is. Because, see, ultimately, one has to understand that LLMs are simply, because I think in the context of LLM is when these conversations are happening. Machine learning and other AI systems were always there. They had been doing so much for us, like YouTube and other companies have been built
Yeah.
on top of it.
Yeah.
But when we talk about LLMs, there is something which is very different, which is happening, because suddenly you have a system which is not as, let's say, in terms of, as I would say, it's a bit probabilistic in nature. You don't have the precision of
Yeah.
what we were doing earlier, because
Correct.
earlier, if you run your AI models on a data, you will get the same answer every time. But here, you will not get the same answer every time. And yet, in business, you need to get answers within a certain framework, certain limitations. So you need to understand how LLMs are fundamentally different. What is the idea of attention, transformers, and therefore, when you build systems to draw more out of it, what controls and what challenges those systems will have.
Yeah, I think, see, learning is a continuous process. We at Masters Union also, we always say to our students that it's not that you graduate today, you're done learning.
Yeah.
I'm not done learning, right? So we always learn on the job, but have your fundamentals and
Yes.
foundational skills really like cleared
Absolutely.
out, and then whatever technology exists, you'll be able to kind
You
of
will be able
equip
to.
yourself with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Shashank, for taking out the time today and telling us more about the careers that are coming, and I hope that audiences today could get some sneak peek into what are the
Yeah.
skills that they need to learn going forward.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here and great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.